Good morning, everybody. All right, we're going to continue on today with our synthesis essays. We're going to practice that time writing this week. Last week, remember, we wrapped up with argument essays. And then today, your Unit 7 progress check and reflection will lock. So you need to make sure that you've completed that on AP Classroom, and then you've completed the 2-question reflection from last Friday. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some reminders for AP synthesis essays. I know it's been a while. So I want to review the Wind Farms prompt that we did last grading period at the beginning of the year. And we spent our time working through that. You had an outline. We worked through every single step. And now we know that that's not going to be possible on the exam. If you wanted to review that Wind Farms prompt or any of the outline work that you did, that might be beneficial to you. So I have some reminders here I'm going to go over, but before I do that, I do want to make sure that you see that I've attached the rubric for the synthesis essay, as well as a high-scoring score point 6 example. So for that same prompt that you would have written yourself. So not only would you have yours with your feedback, you have a score point 6 and a rubric that has highlighted information on it. If you want to review the prompt packet, you can click on this link and it'll prompt you to go and view it again. Okay, so in a synthesis essay, you definitely want to make sure that you answer the prompt. So you're going to have a new prompt today on the concept of eminent domain, and we'll talk about that in a second. In that prompt, you need to make sure that you develop a position on the notion that eminent domain is productive and beneficial. So either yes it is, no it's not, when does it depend, like what's the situation, and can you identify the complexity and nuance within that conversation. Don't merely discuss that yes it can be beneficial and no it's not, right? Take a stand and enter some point of the conversation. Don't necessarily repeat yes, eminent domain can be beneficial and productive. Okay, when? So when you think about what work we've done with it, we've really talked about the most important factors, right? And so this prompt doesn't necessarily talk about factors, but you can attach that for yourself, right? Eminent domain is productive and beneficial when these factors are considered, kind of thing. That's the direction that I went in my example, which we'll talk about in a second. And then whenever possible, try to determine your position before reading the sources. Now, with something like this, you might not be as educated in what it is, and so you might get some sort of understanding from the introductory information, but you do probably need to skim through some of the sources to kind of inform yourself, and that's okay too. When it's possible, like it says in the bullet point, determine your position before. When it's not, then you know you're going to have to do a little bit more groundwork to actually figure out what it is that you're supposed to be writing about, and then what is your position. Ultimately, if you keep your position at the forefront, it will help focus your thinking and your reading. Make sure that you read the sources so that you don't misrepresent what it's saying. If you need to, start reading the beginnings and the ends of each particular article. So if there's a longer article, kind of read the beginning, middle, and end kind of thing, very much like they teach you in the SAT prep work, because again, these sources are just for comprehension. You're not necessarily analyzing any of these sources. You're coming up with your own argument. And so for this reading, you don't need to read as critically, just because you need to understand what the source is saying. So I would just say, if you're still unsure as to what the source is saying, skip over it and find something else. You're only required to use 3 within the entire essay, okay? Sorry I didn't change that slide, but ultimately you need to pre-write, and I'll show you kind of an easy way to do it. There are 3 things you always need to make sure you have, and I want you to work from the outside in because it's just easier. You start with your examples or your evidence, then you funnel your way to your claims, and then from there you craft your thesis. My thesis is never the first thing I write, ever. I always want to think about what I want to use, how I want to use it, and then I craft an argument based around it. So I'll show you what that looks like. If you don't plan, what has happened in the past is that you start to ramble and you don't make your point until the end, or you don't really necessarily make a claim. You just kind of start with an example and don't ever discuss what it's supposed to be teaching us, right? The whole point is that these are arguments. So I don't need you to regurgitate examples or, summarize something for me. I need you to argue a point. And if you don't have anything to say about it because you didn't plan, you're not creating technically an argument. Okay? Document correctly, you need to use quotation marks around anything that you get from any of the sources. Never refer to the authors by their first name, especially their first name only. That is absolutely poor etiquette in writing. You may use their full names or last names only, or you can refer to the source. Document your sources either by letter, the way they show you in the packet, or by author last name, and they again will show you that they'll say source A, and then in parentheses it's the author's last name. You choose a side, but be consistent throughout the entire essay. Remember that your sources should not dominate your argument, but they absolutely need to be included. We talked a little bit about integrating them and using specifics, right? Simply throwing a random quote there with no context whatsoever does not show maturity or style within your writing. So again, integrate them. Chop up specific word choice. If you look at the row B category, that's what's going to earn you the 3 and the 4 in the commentary category, is that you are focused on specific words or phrases and details, not necessarily long quotes that aren't necessarily necessary. Don't let your sources do the majority of the talking. Remember, it's your position. You are simply backing it up with all of the resources. Okay? So now that we've gone through some of those reminders, and hopefully you've looked through the essay, remember one of the strategies for looking at that sophistication point was going to be trying to see if you can put the sources in conversation with each other. You'll notice in a lot of the higher scoring essays, there are multiple examples per paragraph. There's not just one. So if I'm using source A and source D, how am I putting them in conversation with each other? That's a sophisticated way of coming to an argument. So go ahead and open up your copy of your packet. When you click on this link, it'll ask you to make a copy because it becomes yours. You can annotate it, comment on it, whatever it is that you would like to do for your Google Doc. Okay. I know it's going to be difficult, especially if you are at home, but this is only supposed to be a 55-minute process. So you really don't want to spend more than 15 to 20 minutes tops, and I think that's pushing it, reading through the prompt material and through the sources. When I did this last night, it took me about 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more, mostly because I had a lot of interruptions in my house. And so those of you that are at home, you're going to find that those interruptions are going to be there. You're going to have a hard time focusing because you don't want to sit there and focus on this thing. You want to focus on, whatever's going on outside or whatever. If you're in the classroom today, those of you that are in the classroom today, you are getting a paper copy and I am physically timing you. So, I think out of fairness, you definitely want to make sure if you're at home, you're following those same parameters. Okay, so this is a little bit lengthier, but you'll see you have source A through F, and in the parentheses, you could also use that information as well to cite. There is your prompt bolded for you, and then you have the rest of the copy. So here's mine, and again, this took me about 20 minutes or so because of all my interruptions. So this was what I did. So once I read through the topic, I highlighted what eminent domain is because I might not have been familiar with it. I instantly thought of the movie Up because that's where Mr. Fredrickson's, house was going to be seized, and he was trying to fight it for so long. And, you can kind of gather a lot of information from the beginning of that movie. But that's just kind of what came to me, and that was how I was able to anchor onto what it was. So for my position, I didn't really know what I was going to say. So at the beginning, I just said it can be productive or beneficial if certain factors are considered. I had to read the sources in order for me to figure out what the rest of my position would have been. So then I also looked at my rubric here. So I know I need to have at least 3 of the sources. I reminded myself to try to put more than one source in conversation with each other. All right. You'll see through each of my pages, I have things highlighted. For me, I like to rank them on whether they're positive or negative towards the prompt, right? So I know that my position has to either be one side, or I have to really be specific if I'm going to talk about, neutral kind of ground. And so I also look at the sources and figure out, are they credible? Where do they come from? So you'll see it's like a negative perspective or a positive perspective, right? And I have all kinds of notes throughout. I don't have a lot, but I have enough for me to pay attention. And when I'm done, I rank them for myself. So I figure out, am I biasing myself? Which articles do I like? Are they more left leaning, in terms of, yes, I'm all for this, or no, I'm not for this. And so I liked the first four. They were really informative for myself. I felt like the last two were good, but I could do without them if I needed to. These were some of the things that I was thinking of as I was reading. It can be beneficial for those who are privileged. The rationale is based on sacrifice of others without their input, or ultimately it's dependent upon who benefits. So for me, these were all things like, okay, I was working through it. So on the back, I did top 3, and my pre-writing probably took me 5 minutes, okay? But I had to do the groundwork. So you're probably going to have to spend like 10 to 12 minutes or so really pouring through each of the sources. So here's what my pre-writing looks like. I started with my sources, right? I always want to start with my examples or what it is that I'm going to use as proof. So for each of the sources, I just put what I needed to get out of it. Source A was about this, B was about this, C, D, whatever. Then I wanted to come up with my claims, and you can tell my thinking was all over the place, but these were the 3 biggest points that I got from each of these sources as a whole, okay? From there, I needed to mold that into a thesis statement. So I tried and failed horribly with my draft, and then once I did that, look, I didn't even write all the words out and all that stuff. I was just kind of going really, really fast because, again, I have to hurry up and get into my draft. So then finally, I have my thesis here at the bottom. I have 3 reasons. And so I really feel like I can use these 4 sources in conversation with each other in each of these points that I want to make. So I would do this. It's not necessarily funnel looking, but it's the same idea, right? You start with sources, then you craft your claims, and then you have your thesis. That is the bulk of my essay. If I can get all of that in a draft, I will pass, period. So this doesn't look nearly as neat or as nice as outlines that we've done in the past. But ultimately, you're not here to do these long, drawn out, outlines. You're here to make sure that you get college credit and that you pass this exam with flying colors. So the top 3 things in every single essay will always be your evidence or your sources or your examples, right, depending upon the essay. Your claims are going to be automatic. You need a claim in every single essay that you write, and you need a thesis in every single essay that you write. My thesis was so much easier to write because I had thought through what I wanted to say. I just had to compartmentalize all the way down. So now if I flip this, right, if I have my pre-writing and I flip it and I start here and work my way down, my essay is ready to go. I just kind of have to add to it in the conversation, but this keeps me grounded. This keeps me focused on the points that I want to make. So I hope you find that strategy useful to you. It's going to take a little bit of time. Don't freak out if you take a little bit more than 20 minutes this time around. You have to practice. But this topic is something that I know is going to level the playing field because I don't think everybody knows how to have a conversation about eminent domain. And so this is going to push you a little bit to try to figure out how you're going to write something quickly about something that you might not really be educated upon or have really no interest in talking about. It's a mindset. Fake it till you make it. Okay. I couldn't care less really about eminent domain at this moment in my life, but in that moment when I was pre-writing, it was all I wanted to talk about because I just needed to get myself centered and ready to go. So if you need help with any of that, or if you're not quite sure what I did with my pre-writing or how you can make that work for you, please ask. That's what I'm here for. So again, you don't have to. This is completely optional. But if you have some time after your 15 minutes of doing this, I really would time yourself the 40 minutes and handwrite it so that tomorrow you just spend the time typing your essay in Turnitin.com. I also know that you have a lot on your plate. So I'm not excusing procrastination or laziness, but I also understand that my class is not the only class in AP that you're taking or the only AP exam you're taking. So I did build in time tomorrow for you to type the essay. But I know for me, if I start and stop something, I'm going to forget everything. So I might as well just pre-write and do the actual essay while I'm thinking about it today, put it away, and then all I have to do is type it. It'll take 15 minutes tomorrow, and then I can move on with the rest of my week. So you have options. I don't necessarily know where you are in the grand scheme of things, but you do what works best for you. I just wanted to make sure I presented viable options for you to be productive today. All right, I'm going to start with your outlines today, so be on the lookout for some feedback and some grades on those outlines. And I would get started on that research paper sooner rather than later because that deadline is going to sneak up on us, okay? Thanks for staying with me today, guys. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.